Today we're talking about how to calculate the equity in your own home, which is a really frequent question that I get. And by answering this, it will allow you to plan for future remortgages, maybe moving home, or maybe even releasing equity to buy a buy-to-let. Now, to start this video off, the most important number that we need to know when it comes to doing any kind of buy-to-let, BRR, property flip, whatever you're planning to do, is to know the end value. Second to that is obviously the purchase price, which we need to obviously purchase for the right price to be able to make profit on property. And then last of all is the amount we spent. Now, this is less important because if we go and spend £60,000 on a property, that doesn't affect the equity we have in a property, it just affects the profitability of it at the end. So in order to illustrate this video, I thought I would run through the numbers, which we'll do over there. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to use very clear, round numbers I've completely plucked out the air. Don't relate to this project, don't relate to anything I'm doing right now, but I think will be a really useful way to illustrate what we're doing here. So to start with, we need to look at the potential end value, as I told you, which could be 300,000. So if we purchase a property, maybe we live there for a couple of years, we add some value, the end value is 300,000. If we actually bought this property for 200,000, and we used a 10% deposit, being £20,000, then immediately we have £20,000 of equity in that property. In this example, I'm going to assume that we go ahead and we spend £60,000, let's say. So maybe we bought a bungalow, but the ground floor was big enough, but maybe we needed to do a loft extension. And in the loft extension, plus refurbishing the whole house, we spent £60,000. So we now know we spend 60 on the refurb. So there's our three main numbers: end value, purchase price with deposit, and then our refurb, which is potentially £60,000. Now this is the part where we work out how much equity we have in the property. So what I'll do is I'll move over here. We've got that £200,000 that we paid and purchased the property for. We know that we put a £20,000 deposit in, which gives us 180,000 of mortgage, and we've got £20,000 of equity. Now, what we need to do is obviously, assuming that we've maybe been at this property a couple of years, we've added value through the refurbishment, maybe even we've ridden the market in the upward trend, and that's how it's managed to get to an end value of 300,000 or a refinance value of 300,000. We now need to work out what, off of this remaining amount, if we've been doing repayment mortgages, which we probably would do on a home, if we put down 10%, we've got a 90% mortgage, we're probably going to be doing repayment mortgage. So let's say, which just for argument's sake, and again, just to keep round numbers, that we've paid off £8,000 in just monthly payments. Obviously, some of that is going to be interest towards the mortgage, some of that is going to be coming off the debt. So if we've been there a couple of years, been paying that mortgage, we've now paid 8,000 off of the debt, which actually means that remaining debt, the balance we need to pay off when we refinance for the higher amount, is going to be 172. And therefore, we do that calculation. New value, 300,000 minus 172. And that gives us 128,000. And that right there is our equity. Because we've got the original 20,000, we've then used that to obviously taken it off the purchase price. We've then taken away our repayments. We then have our total debt outstanding, take that off of the new value of the property, and that gives us 128,000 as our total equity. Now, if we're obviously being critical, if we were doing this as a property flip, then that isn't £128,000 of equity because we've spent 60, we've probably spent money on solicitors, stamp duty, what have you. So the actual equity would probably be more like, or the profit that we make and have created, more like 68,000 because we take away that 60 grand refurb and obviously any other costs. But if this is a home, if this is something that we've lived in, we've added value to, we've spent money on, then this is equity. This is money that when we refinance, we can play with. So at this point in the video, you might ask me, well, now we've got 128 grand equity, what do we do with it? Moving forward, the amount of money that you free up or that you decide to pull out the property really depends on your future plans. So are you looking to remortgage, stay at the property and then do something with that equity? Or are you looking to rent or flip that property? Because of course, what your future plans are will dictate what you do with that money, what mortgage you use, what percentage of equity you'll leave in the property, and what percentage of money you'll pull out of that property. So for the purposes of the video, we'll cover both. But if we start with the fact that you might look to remortgage the property, pull money out, but actually stay there. So if we actually looked to remortgage now at 300,000 and we actually took ourselves back to either, so we remortgaged at this price, took ourselves back to either a 10% or 20% deposit. So we're going to leave this money in, and then anything additional we're going to take out. If we go down the route of a 10% deposit and leaving that in, then of course we're going to be leaving in 30,000. And this means that we can therefore be pulling out more money and actually pull out 98,000. So that's 30 leaving in and 98,000 coming out the property. Because remember, our total is 128,000. Now, obviously, if we do that method, we've taken ourselves down to a 10%. We're almost like resetting ourselves, and we're going to have to start repaying down the debt on that property again. But assuming that we put this £98,000 released to good use, maybe we buy more properties rather than buying a Lambo or going on some nice holidays, then it's probably a great use of money, good way to leverage your money. Now, the alternative option, which is a win-win, which is leave more money in the property, so you continue to have a good amount of equity in your home, in your property, but also be able to utilize the capital, is leaving 20% in. And obviously, if we do that, we're going to be leaving 60,000 in the property, and we're going to be looking at releasing £68,000. So 68 to release, and we can still buy a buy-to-let with that. We could still probably buy 2 or 3 buy-to-lets with that, depending on the area of the UK that you purchase it. So that's still a very good model. It means that we still have a good amount of equity in our home, and therefore probably keep repayments at a reasonable level so we can continue to live there, not at too high a cost, and obviously repay down the debt. Now, the alternative option is perhaps that you might look to rent this property out and then pull the equity out and then move to a new property. And that perhaps is where you might go on to live. And of course, if we do that, we're probably going to be looking at a 25% mortgage. So, 25% deposit, 75% mortgage. So we're going to leave 25% in the property, and then we're going to get 75% loan to value mortgage. So of course, if we do go down this route, then we are going to be leaving a bit more money in the property, and obviously therefore can take out a bit less. So in this instance, we will be leaving in £75,000, and we'll be taking out £53,000. And that's the money that we can use to then go off and buy a new home, which, providing you have good income, providing that you're in an area where the values aren't too high, then that's probably a good 10, possibly even 15% deposit on another property of a similar value. Now, of course, at this point in the video, it makes sense to caveat the fact that there are a whole ton of fees that come up, including solicitor fees, remortgaging fees, stamp duty, loads of different things that are going to come up and potentially eat into that £128,000 of equity. However, as you can see, I've kept the numbers really clean, really simple, so then you can sit there at home, work out your equity and start to make plans for the future. I hope this has been useful. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.